G'day, this is Expand the Phantom podcast. Our website is chroniclechamber.com and you can subscribe to our podcast via YouTube or through your favourite podcast apps. Please give us a rating that will help other fans find us. Welcome to episode 280, where we talk to Matt Kyme, the writer, the artist, and even a radio star. Matt has been on our podcast several times and even hosted a few episodes during COVID, which was great fun. In his last podcast he joined us, which was episode 218, he talked about the story published in the latest Frew issue, 1969, which was still in its infancy at that stage. That issue is now out, and Phantom Nuffy fans around the country are all geeking out. So why not geek out together and let us dig in and let us have some fun. G'day, Dan. How are you?
Yeah, good on. I'm excited. You've just that reminds me of Phil Gould in the dead try or the try zone of a New South Wales Queensland State of Origin game. That pump up you've just given that, mate. I'm from Queensland, and there was a period of time where he would just get the blood flowing and the juices going in anticipation, and that was a great pump up. So I'm looking forward to having a chat with Matt today.
Hopefully we don't let everyone else down. And Matt, how are you?
Oh, I'm thrilled. I appreciate that pump up too. That's made my day. Thank you. I can't wait to chat about the latest story.
Awesome. So I think probably the biggest change is no Mustache. Since we last had you on the podcast, and most fans who saw you in Supernova and other conventions and all that, you were sporting a rather ugly tash to be.
Well, that answers the question right there. That's why I got rid of it. 3 years of self-inflicted ugliness, and I look in the mirror and sometimes I think, yeah, that looks cool, and other times I look in the mirror and think, what am I doing?
So was Tom Selleck out of Magnum PI back in the 80s or 90s, was that your goal?
You know, it wasn't. I mean, he's a cool guy and he wore it well, and I didn't know when I started growing it that that's what it would become. You know, I looked at other mustaches that were nice and neat, and mine just grows out like a broom, and yeah, it just, I couldn't trim it in a way to look more discreet. It was just this big, fat, bushy mustache that was like Tom Selleck or Burt Reynolds or someone like that.
Now we're showing our age.
That's the last time mustaches were cool.
And what you said, Phantom fans showing their age. That doesn't sound right.
Yeah. That's it. But as we don't have you on here to talk about facial hair because even Dan's sporting some as well. But we're actually here to talk about the latest Frew comic, 1969. So are you happy with the comic, the final product?
Look, I'm thrilled. I was looking forward to seeing the cover. I knew Marcelo was doing the cover. I'd been told by Frew, and I hadn't seen it. And so when I finally saw the cover for it, and it was put up by one of your fans,
Anthony Gillies.
Anthony, that's right. Thank you. And he was good enough to put a picture of the cover in its entirety. And yeah, the first time I saw it, it was from you sending it through, and I was absolutely thrilled because I've always enjoyed Marcelo's work, and I was wondering what aspect of it he was going to take, and to see like multiple parts of the story all kind of composed together in that composition, and the colors as well. It really blew me away. I have all my comics up on display in my room, and I look at them and I think, it's hard to pick a favorite. Marcelo's done an absolutely stunning job of this.
So if you're on YouTube, we will flick through this comic quite a lot and stuff like that as well. So if you haven't read the comic yet, you might want to jump on YouTube.
Or pause this and go and read the comic because there's going to be spoilers up the wazoo.
Oh yes, we are not shying away from spoilers. There will be spoilers. Very good point, Dan. So have you read any opinions or thoughts or anything like that from fans? Have fans been giving you lots of feedback?
To be honest, a week's gone by now and I haven't seen that much. I've had a few messages. Shane Foley sent me a really lovely message, and Kieran, Kieran Jack, and a few other close friends, and I've seen a few comments on social media, but I haven't really had a lot of feedback come my way. I haven't heard anything from Frew about the response. So yeah, I'm kind of really intrigued to hear tonight. I know you've got some questions and comments prepared from some of the fans, so I'm actually really looking forward to hearing what people think of it. Terrified as well in a way, because this is kind of playing with some pretty important storylines. This is phantom spirituality, basically, isn't it, amongst the fans? This is like a religion. So when I wrote the story, I thought this will probably polarize people. Some will love it, and unfortunately, some may hate it, but we'll see.
Are you happy with the overall product in terms of how the book? We've talked about the cover, but you've obviously, as an artist as well, you'd be keen to see how the artwork came out on the page and the print quality and all that sort of stuff. As an overall product as a book, how you feel about it?
Yeah, all right. I'll be. I don't want to nitpick. There are a few things that weren't what I expected. For example, the page you're showing on the left with the phans and rowing. It was never my intention to have that white trim around it, and I wonder if I should have been more clear with Frew about what I wanted, or if it was a bit of an amateur mistake.
Yeah.
My intention. All the pages that are black, if you hadn't noticed, those scenes are at nighttime, and it was always my hope. I guess I just assumed that when we go to print, that black would go right beyond the bleed and be cut. So the first time I saw it, actually, Jermayn sent me a little video, and he was going through the pages because I hadn't received my copy yet. And yeah, the first thing I thought was, oh no, the white border around the pages kind of kills the effect I was going for. I wanted those to be nighttime scenes. And I wanted it just as a simple visual thing that the audience might not even be cognizant of, but when they turn the page, it's a new scene, it's a new day.
And I can absolutely see how that page, which is like page 8 or something, would have looked really effective with that black border the whole way around to really solidify that night feel.
And so I don't want to take a swipe at Frew. It's probably my fault. But yeah, anyone at home with a black texter, just get it out and just fill it all in for me, okay? And compare it.
So when you sign copies at Supernova and conventions, is that what you're going to be doing?
Or I might just get like an A4 trimmer and just get the comments and just trim it down a little bit, trim the border off. People don't need to know what page number it is. They just need to know if it's nighttime or daytime.
So, are there anything else that you was happy with the way it came out, or could have been done better?
Yeah, I'll just, because I don't want to focus on negatives. I'll just bring up one other thing that I would change if possible, and I think it's something to do with the printing technology. Throughout the comic, there's a few flashback scenes, particularly at the ends. I can tell you which pages they are. I think the first flashback that appears is on page 17. And you'll see there's that famous scene where Rama Singh has got his blade out and the 20th Phantom is rowing.
Yes.
And I asked Graham Jackson, my frequent collaborator, he did all the lettering. I asked if there's a way you could make that panel stand out from the others. And you notice it has like a rounded edge around it. And also he's put like a bit of a texture on it to make it look like it's like an old-fashioned comic. Now, I can tell you, he did an excellent job on that, but I think the printing technology hasn't really aligned with our vision, and it's come out a bit speckled. And the same thing has happened if you jump forward a bit to page 24. There's the scene where Commissioner Blakely is recounting what's just happened. So I wanted to make that also stand out as different on that page. That is not taking place at the current time. That's another flashback. And you'll see there that the printing in that panel almost looks like it has a pattern on it. And if you jump forward to the worst example, which really kind of hurts when I look at it, on page 33, I think you had it up before, where I've replicated some of Ray Moore's beautiful panels from the original story. Yeah, for some dreadful reason, there's that awful pattern in the grey. It looks like wallpaper. But other than that, I completely love the way this comic has come out. I don't want to nitpick. I don't want the people at Frew to hear that and think, oh, what a whinger. It's just, it's something that's probably my fault in the first place, the way it was set up. I hope me pointing that out hasn't wrecked it for people who've enjoyed the comic. It's a minor thing, I don't mind it. But
Matt, can I tell you that each of the things that you've just brought up, that panel did panel did pop out of the page, and as soon as you brought our attention to the page, I'm flicking through my own comic here, not the one on screen, and that's the one that my eye's drawn to. So that effect has worked. And I actually genuinely thought when I was reading it for the second or third time this afternoon, that page 33 that you're talking about, that really. I didn't hate the patterning on that at all. That made it feel like
it did for me as well. Yeah.
That made it actually more. So, what are the effect you were going for? If this is a poor example of it, as far as you're concerned, well, it must have been magnificent, because this actually had a really positive effect on me.
Oh, that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. I just wanted it to be. Graham's able to apply like a bit of a texture that is reminiscent of what Ray Moore used to do, because it was a different technique then. They'd actually have, like, you've probably seen original pages, they'd have like a layer of like an acetate.
Yeah, zipper tone.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so Graham's able to replicate that really nicely digitally, but then when it's gone to print, and the same thing happened in A Day at the Races as well. If you flick through that again, for some reason, the blacks are never black, they're dark grey. And sometimes the pattern on the Phantom and in some of the backgrounds has this pattern in it. And I remember speaking to Dudley about it afterwards, and he said that, he wasn't sure. I think he said he wasn't sure why that happened, but he'd look into it. But as I said, I'm still thrilled with it. It's just, it took me a bit out of the story because I'm so used to seeing it
on the computer screen.
On the screen, but also when I've printed it out, just at work on the normal printer there, it had the desired effect. So whatever printing technology Frew's printers are using, it hasn't picked up hasn't picked up the subtlety, I guess, in those panels.
Well, as I say, mate, don't let it keep you up at night, because I actually quite enjoyed the effect. So
yeah, no, I won't. It's just, I was just reflecting on the good and the bad. I started with the negatives because to me they're small. But everything else, even just looking at that, I'm so happy that the lettering is clear, the art's nice and clear, the flow, I'm pretty proud of this, and I'm proud of the way that Frew have put it together as well.
No, that's good. So why did you want to write a prequel to this story?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess as a big fan of the Phantom, I'd always felt that I've always loved the childhood of the Phantom story, but felt there's been a big gap between those events and then the Phantom becoming the Phantom. And I think there was a story illustrated by Don Newton, which covered the same sort of time, but they got it completely wrong. Like the story was way off. The art was beautiful, and the story was good, but it was kind of like a Elseworlds kind of story, or a what if. Like it didn't line up with the Phantom story. So another reason I wanted to do it is I would have liked to have seen more of the backstory of Uncle Dave as well. I just think that he's a war hero, and he's also was the captain of police. But when he was first introduced by Falk, he was none of that. He was just kind of this portly little fellow that
It's a playboy in a sense.
Yeah. And then later on, Falk made him into a more interesting character and gave him, some stories. But I just thought, wouldn't it be great to tell a story from two perspectives? A story we're familiar with already, but we'll go back a little bit, show a bit more, but show it from the Phantom's perspective as a young man, as a man who's dealing with trauma because his father's just died, and he's got this commitment to this oath, which is difficult. I wanted to show his adopted family, or so to speak, Maud's family, his mother's family, I should say. And
I did like that.
Yeah, also flesh out what Dave was like and have him as an integral part of the story. Those were some of the goals I had.
So what about Fats Horgan?
Well, yeah, I know. Fats Horgan and Prince Achmed Singh, these characters are just completely vanished. I think, a few years ago when I prepared a video for you guys about my thoughts on the Singh Brotherhood, I really, I read that story over and over when I was preparing my script. And there were all these things like the trough, for instance, the Sunda trough. That's completely disappearing from the story. Achmed completely disappearing from the story. And the New York setting completely disappearing from the story. I thought they were sort of, in a way, like missed opportunities. Well, they were interesting things that I was invested in that suddenly just disappeared. So this was a chance to kind of go back in time a bit and make some of that stuff up.
Now, because I know you and I went down, dare I say, a trough or a deep hole when we were talking about the Sandra trough. What was your feelings when you actually found out it was actually a real location?
It made sense because, the early stories, the Phantom was living in Sumatra, wasn't he? So it made sense that Falk initially was referring to these exotic places. And also keep in mind the 1930s, a lot of people had a bit of money. They'd travel and they'd go on cruises and, they might go big game hunting, things like that, people with money. And so that spilled into novels and, literature and comics and stuff, because those were the interests of the time. It was before science fiction was popular. It was the Orient and the jungle. So it made a lot of sense that Sumatra and Java would be mentioned, and the Sunda Trough actually is a real place. So a bit of a shock as well, because I thought, I've written this story now that involves this place, and it's not accurate. But it's a fantasy story anyway, so I guess it doesn't matter.
So what's actually interesting, I remember, so for those who don't know, I actually just recently visited the trough. Totally ironic and totally coincidental.
I know. You tell your wife, but on the podcast, you can tell us you deliberately cruised across the Sunda Trough.
Yeah, but it was kind of
that vortex, weren't you?
Yeah, it was kind of ironic, because we were actually talking while I was sailing over, and I sent the cruise map, and it had that location. And I actually visited some islands like within not long, within half a day's of sail of that area, and a lot of the islands looked like that. Like I actually went to one called Komodo Island. There's a couple of others, and they've all kind of got that half-eaten donut feel, which looks like it's a volcano in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's another thing that I found interesting during my research and so on the trench is that there was actually a 7.7 magnitude earthquake in 1935 in that area. So I wonder if that's where Lee Falk got the idea from, is because
well,
that
it makes
probably
sense, doesn't it?
it probably
Would have
made
been.
news,
Yeah.
and that would have been
To be honest, and I love Lee Falk, but from what I know about him, I feel like you've probably done more research on this.
Yeah.
I should also point out to people listening in or watching that this whole introduction of the story here, this scene, this really came through a conversation with you guys and Duncan and Shane, really, because I had the idea for the prequel set in New York and with Fats and Diana and the SS Trotter and all that, and we talked about showing why Fats was so terrified of the Phantom. And then I think, through our discussion, and it was probably Jermayn talked about, would you consider doing something about the Sunda trough? And I thought, yeah, what a terrific idea, having a little scene which introduces that, because it was a throwaway line really that was never returned to. And also it had a really deep impact on Achmed. So I wrote this little prequel kind of thing for him in there as well.
So you wrote a prequel to the prequel.
Yeah. But then I was thinking, like the trough, what is that? Like it's like the Mariana Trench, isn't it? It's below the ocean. And I just I was stuck in my vision of it being like this submerged volcano and the Singh having a base there. And then, I started thinking, maybe I'm going down the wrong track with this. Maybe I should be talking about something deep underwater. But then what could that possibly be? That's one part of the story, one part of the Singh Brotherhood I didn't really like, how they used to go down that vortex down to Krakatoa.
I really like that. I think the Ian Fleming still owes Lee Falk royalties for stealing the base underneath the ocean idea.
Yeah.
There's quite a few story references. Now, again, if you're on YouTube, I will be having them up on the screen. And if you're on audio only, we will try our best at referencing them. So obviously there's the Singh Brotherhood, which is kind of like an obvious one. But there's also the childhood of the Phantom by this little panel here, which I really loved. I picked it straight away. I'm like, I know that panel. And it was, it was amazing. So, but one of the things that I really liked was that in both childhood stories, that same panel is referenced.
I mean, it's just such a stunning picture that Ray Moore, Wilson McCoy drew all those years ago. And you'll notice if you have had a chance to compare the story, the text is the same, the scene is the same. And so that's why I gave writing credit to Lee Falk, because it would be very disrespectful not to. And also why I mentioned the names of those artists. Yeah. So, he'll be all right, mother. He will sob. He will. I probably wouldn't have put sob in a speech bubble, but that's what Falk did. And I just thought, imagine the impact that would have on a little kid. You barely see your father because he's always off saving the world, and every now and then he comes back, on a stretcher. The band are bringing him into the skull cave, and he thinks his dad might die.
And while we're on this page, I know we're talking about the other stories you've referenced there, but while we're here, the juxtapositioning of the pose between the devastated kid who doesn't know if his dad's going to die. And then I don't, forgive me, I don't know the exact number of years, but we cross to the next page and it's like 10 years later and his dad actually has died, and that's the position he's adopted on the throne. That was just, and then the growing size of that, that drew an emotion out of me, Matt. So you've done very well there.
Thank you so much, Dan. That's entirely what I was going for. I wanted people to kind of linger on that image and zoom in on it. And I really hope that people wouldn't speed through this comic, that they'd kind of like take their time. It can really hurt an artist when someone like reads a comic in 2 minutes flat. I should also say that idea came a bit later. I had drawn the Phantom on the throne in a much more Phantom-like way, you know, like a typical Phantom, strong, you know, his fists on the sides of the skulls and him sitting up straight. Yeah. And it didn't work. And I look back at the image I'd drawn of him as a child and I thought, oh, I don't know if people are going to be ready for this. I don't know if I can draw the Phantom in such a vulnerable way and get away with it. But then I drew it and I thought, no, I think that's perfect. I think it shows he's still just a young man, like he's probably about 19 or 20 years old. He's sitting in the exact same position that he did when he was a little kid.
Feeling there's such similar emotions of, you know, then will dad die? Oh my God, now he has. Like he's exactly in the same spot.
And also I wanted to tease out the tension that perhaps his father did die. Like in that panel of the boat, there's no text. There's just like a black sky and like the moon's reflection on the water. And the Phantom is like, you can't see him. Like he's completely in the boat. And then, you know, we see he's being stretched in. So I wanted for a moment people to think, oh, that's how he died.
It's the moment.
It's actually kind of ironic you made mention that. A friend of mine was reading the comic for the first time, or the story, tonight before we recorded, and he's messaging me, why didn't Matt change the way the 20th Phantom died? And then 5 minutes later he goes, oh, no, he didn't. Ignore that.
Yeah.
So you got desired.
That's music to my ears. That's like the kind of fake out I was going for. You know, I wanted the people to think, oh, look at this Phantom. Like he's been shot in the back. He's barely escaped that place. He's blown it, like he's leveled it. Days later, he's been brought back and he's just a dead body. But then no, he's survived. But a mere 10 years later, now he has died, and it's something that Kit always knew would happen. He's seen it throughout his childhood, and yeah, it's disturbing. It's he's got to put on the costume, he's got to swear the oath, he has to put on the mask and go out and see the bandar, but he's just not ready to do it. And Garan's encouraging him, you know, this is your time.
And just to linger on the posing for just a moment longer, I can't think of another single time we would have seen the Phantom on the skull throne in that pose. So I understand what you're saying about, oh, you're worried about what it might look like. But just again, that last panel of, okay, now I'm stepping down, I'm ready to, you know, stand up and be the Phantom. It's a really powerful moment. So well done to you, mate.
And I can say, I honestly, I was scared of the reaction of that page. Because it's so atypical of the way we see him. Like he's cuddled up like I didn't want people to think that he looked weak, because it's not weak. You know, it's vulnerable. It's upset. It's still, you know, he's still a brave hero. But we all have these, you know, these doubts and these, you know. I just wanted to show in this story a bit more psychology behind the Phantom.
And just while we're here, and I know, Jen, we'll get back again, sorry to interrupt, but so this is the end of the 8 or 9 page prologue of ultimately a 33 page story. Yeah. So it's a fair chunk of your overall story that you've devoted to this idea that came after your actual idea, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and it's an integral part.
Mm.
This story, like all my stories, there's like the initial concept, and then a few other things start to stick to it, and then I ask people for their feedback, and more sticks to it, and then I look at it and I mull over it and plan it, and I think, what do the fans want? What do I want? Is it the same thing? I don't want to come along and be the guy that wrecks the fandom for everyone. I don't want to write stories that people think, what's this crap? I want people
we have enough of those people.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I want people to enjoy it. I don't care, for if I almost said something really pretentious. Like I don't. Yeah, I'll just say it. I want people to enjoy it, whether they like me or not, or my writing style. I want them to still think, "Oh, this is a good Phantom story," in spite of me.
So just a couple of other things I want to draw attention to. This bottom corner here looks a lot like your first ever Phantom print.
Yeah.
Which I believe from memory you drew this in response to the passing of Jim Shepherd.
Yeah, and in a way, I feel like it's a real full circle kind of moment. I was just a kid with a dream back then. I never had any aspiration of working on the Phantom. I was just a Phantom fan, and I noticed that not many people were doing fan art of the Phantom, and I'd heard that Jim Shepherd had died, and it kind of hit me a bit because back since 1988 or whenever it was when he took over, when I was a kid, and probably the same as you, when I'd buy a comic, I would read every single word in that comic, and then I'd get to the end and I'd go back to the front and read it again. And I used to, and Jim Shepherd, he'd write some pretty lengthy introductions, like particularly in the big ones like this, the blockbuster issues, they go for pages and pages. But I always found that stuff fascinating. I love the backstory, and I love just little things like how he'd always have a swipe at different artists like Bill Leganti, and he'd have a swipe at the foreign stuff. Yeah, like I didn't agree.
Stuff. Talking about an Australian comic that introduces foreign comics, i.e., from America, but he's having a go at the foreign stuff. Never mind. The other thing that I was making, there's a story reference of which we've talked about before, Rama Singh there. Have we missed any?
I don't think so. I was earlier tonight. I was going through it, and I was looking for any other little Easter eggs and things like that. But I don't think so. Like the Phantom lore comes from all over the place, but the actual storylines are just the Singh Brotherhood, the Belt, and obviously the childhood of the Phantom.
Yeah.
But in particular, the version which is in this one, in issue 1063, because I've read both versions of it, and they conflict.
Oh, like everything that Lee Falk wrote conflicts.
The 1944 version that he did with McCoy, people out there listening, I encourage you to read that and compare it to the other version, because I think there might be 10 years between the two stories.
Yeah, the overall story is the same, but there's a few maybe that could be your next podcast, Matt, with us.
Maybe.
So how long did this story take to create, from your initial, discussions to, getting it finished?
Yeah, well, typical of me, the writing was pretty quick. After coming up with the initial concept and mulling it over for a couple of days and creating something that I was excited about as a little synopsis and sending it to my little brain's trust of people that I admire and like getting feedback from. having a few different ideas bounce back at me. One that really, really stood out to me was from Duncan, who he mentioned how he liked how the end of this blends well into the Singh Brotherhood. And he said it's a bit like that movie Rogue One, the Star Wars movie.
Mm.
And I hadn't considered that at all. And that blew my mind. And I thought, he's just nailed exactly what I'm trying to do here. I hadn't actually thought that through, but the way that Rogue One leads right up to A New Hope, and mine's a bit different because my story actually goes pretty far into the Singh Brotherhood.
Mm.
Yeah.
My
So
story
here on page 21, you're seeing the famous, punching.
the first ever scene
Of the script.
yeah.
Mm.
So if it was Rogue One, my story would have ended at this point. But
Yes.
I had more story to tell. I wanted to show what happened to Fats and what happens with Dave Palmer. So my story, I could have easily have made this comic 100 pages long, I reckon.
Yeah.
Very easily. And I when I pitched it to Frew, I said, "How long do you want this to be?" I didn't suggest that it be like a graphic novel, but I kind of implied that it could go long. And then I was thinking, should I include all those scenes on the SS Trotter in my comic? If I do that, because I'll just to refresh my memory, I'll just open up the Singh Brotherhood. There's a lot that happens. Off panel. Like,
Yeah.
he meets Diana on the SS, he rescues her, but then
And where's the kiss?
the kiss. Didn't do the kiss. Basically, after she is saved by the Phantom from the SS Trotter, she basically goes to see Phyllis, then she goes to see Jimmy, and then that same night, after speaking to Jimmy, that's when this occurs. And so I lifted this scene directly from the comic. So my dilemma was, there's some really like important stuff which happened in between, which isn't in my comic. Should I recap that stuff? And if so, like, that'll be a pretty significant part of the comic. And I decided not to, but I did on page, I think it's page 32, wasn't it? Yeah, on page 33, I put some of those key scenes in there.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you, I was nervous about that as well, because I thought, someone that hasn't read that story, are they going to have any idea what this comic is about? Because that's a big risk. You've sat down with a comic and you've read it and you got to this part and thought, hey, what happened? Why did the story?
So for those who are on our audio only, we're talking about some scenes of when the Phantom first appears in the Singh Brotherhood story, when Fats shoots, when he's racing up the gum tree, when he rescues Diana on the boat. And then when the last time we see Fats is when he says, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think for me, Matt, and I can only speak, you've obviously been so deep in this over such a long time. I've read it 3 times,
Right.
I think you've made the right call in many senses, because two reasons. They feel like 2 complementary stories, and maybe there'll be people who read it into the Phantom, and then they go and read the Singh Brotherhood and they go, gee, that Singh Brotherhood complements Enter the Phantom really well. It has a sense of that for me. And also, like, in terms of your overall structure, in terms of doing your own story and those flashbacks to those key Phantom moments, we know, it felt to me like, a swimmer who's got fins on and is just kicking underwater, pops their head up for air. Oh, this is familiar Phantom territory. Back into your world.
Yeah.
Swim. Oh, I know where I am. Swim. So I really liked that.
I'm happy to hear you say that, Dan. And as I said, I was worried that it was confuse people that weren't familiar. You know, I knew that the diehard fans will have read that story and be very familiar with it. But I was kind of worried about like the new kid that picks up the comic and reads it and gets to this section and thinks, oh, you know what's going on? Why did all this stuff happen off scene? I got a message from Shane Foley, and he said, the only tiny criticism is that I wish you'd shown the scene where the Phantom actually gets Fats before bringing him in, but that's tiny. And I was simply running out of space. You know, as I said, I would gladly have made this 100-page story, and I'd really like deep dive into Dave and the Phantom and have Diana in it, because it killed me not having Diana in it, because you know I'm a big Diana fanboy. But yeah, like I had 32 pages because I didn't want to push it with Frew. 32 pages to tell this story. Yeah, this is what you get.
So how long did it take you in time of months? And obviously you've got a full-time job.
Yeah.
And you've got a wife and kids that you got to spend quality time with as well. So are we talking about a year, 2 years?
Yeah. I'd have to go back through Instagram. That's the way I keep track of things. I put a post up the other night. You might have it in front of you, where I said that this is the first time I worked on a page for this comic was, I forget, it was like maybe a year ago, or it was like December 2022 or something. So the comic has been finished for a while. What happens with Frew is you finish the project and you send it in, and it has to be approved by King Features, and that takes time. And then it sits on their publication schedule. So I might have finished the story about 6 months ago. And, at this stage, like, you actually start to get a bit disconnected from the story, because, you've worked on it for so long, but then you finish it and then nothing. Story is...
So it was December 22.
Yeah. So that's ages ago. I started it.
Yeah, which was that one there.
Well, Jerm said at the start that you'd mentioned it in episode 218. That's 62 podcasts ago.
Yeah. Like this has been germinating for a long, long time. And the arts, I put, far more detail in this. A lot of people will know me from A Day at the Races, where I was doing the Rain More. And some people will know me from Manhunt, which is, a more modern style. And so this is clearly the Manhunt style, but there's lots of characters, there's lots of backgrounds, there's lots of vehicles, motorcycles. There's a picture of a bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge, which took me, I don't know if it took me a week.
See, I saw that one. I'm like, that's really detailed, but he's just used a ruler and that won't have taken long.
Well,
No.
Page 26 we're talking about for
Page
those
26,
following on at home.
I almost get PTSD looking at that image. It took
All right, I'll
so
make it
long to
smaller
draw,
then.
but it took so long to color as well. And when I say color, I mean put in the gray tones.
Really?
Yeah, because if you look in there, like, it's not just,
Zoom in, Jerm.
it's not just black, white, and one gray. There's like multiple different grays in there.
There's a lot of grades of shade. There's more shades of grey in here than there is in the AFL administration house.
And look, it's almost picture perfect, mate. Like, you look at that and go, is that but no, that is a drawing. The shadows and the way that you use light there, the time's been worth it for what it's worth.
Now, I've got 2 bones to pick with you.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
First of all, you didn't explain why the Phantom used the gloves.
Yeah.
I would have, because I was waiting for that, and I noticed this guy here is wearing the Phantom's gloves.
He could have so easily taken those gloves.
But this is because I'm like, you're answering all these other questions for me, so I'm like, okay, he's gonna answer these two questions for me, and this was one of them, the
And in the
gloves.
next panel, Phantom's grabbing gloves off him.
But this is where my mind's going, because it's like you're
Yeah.
fulfilling, you're crossing off all these unanswered questions I've had for the last 30 odd years.
Well,
Just
then
showing my
another
age.
thing that I could have explained is why he was wearing a different pair of undies when he first arrived, like with no stripes.
But
I mean, these are the,
the explanation to that one in our comic.
And then the second thing is
yes,
I would have loved, and this is just me again being a total nerd, nuffy, whatever word you want to use. I would have loved a bit of byplay with Jimmy Wells, because there's that great rumor, and I think it's just a rumor, that Lee Falk was going to use Jimmy as the alter ego for the Phantom. So I would have just, but look, apart from that, I absolutely love the story. And you answered Sunda Trough, you answered what happened to Fats Morgan, you answered Prince Akeem, why he was scared of it regarding the flashbacks, and everything else you answered. But if I had to be picky, and if we were allowed to go to that 100 pages,
yeah.
they're the two things that, and that would have just tickled me purple.
Well, I think I've already written more stories about Jimmy Wells than Lee Falk.
Yeah. But
He's appeared in 3 of my 5 comments.
Yeah, right.
The Jimmy Wells thing, from my previous appearances here in the videos I've prepared for you guys, like Jimmy Wells could have been the original Clark Kent or the original Bruce Wayne. He would have been the original Bruce Wayne, but better. And that would have explained, his fortune and his ability to
be tired and why he couldn't get up,
and he's just such a fun character, like some of my favorite scenes, which I've replicated in here, is that banter between he and Diana, that he's just this, it would just be the perfect cover for the Phantom, But
Could I just say that I personally have big fears that whole beautiful story about Lee Falk was going to create Jimmy Wells. I think it's false. So I hope I didn't burst anyone's bubbles, but I've read a lot of Lee Falk interviews, and I've read all of the interviews before the mid-90s. Make no mention of it, and then someone all of a sudden has this theory, and he goes, "Oh, yeah, that's what I intended." And then every interview after that, he replicated that story. So
it's just such a classic scene, though, that they're at that party together. Like Phyllis was there as well, and they're at that party, and the Singh pirates they make off with Diana, and Jimmy shows some bravery. And he approaches them and says, "What's going on?" And then Achmed Singh's driver punches him, and he backs off completely like a coward, which could still be the Phantom, like hamming it up a little bit. And then Phyllis arrives and said, "What's wrong?" And he says, "Oh, can I borrow your car? I've got to go and sulk." That is the Phantom using Phyllis's car to go and phantomize, but not to be.
Well, we can pick up this discussion again at the next time we catch up at Supernova or the dinner. But we will move on in this podcast.
One final thing on it. I didn't want the Phantom fans to come after me with pitchfork. I wasn't going to change the legacy. I wasn't going to I wasn't even tempted to imply that Jimmy Wells was the Phantom, but also it would contradict the childhood of the Phantom, where Kit and Diana were childhood sweethearts, and that's something which I played in with this story with Lucy Walker saying, you and that beautiful Diana, you two are like two peas in a pod. Surely you're going to reconnect with her. And he says, "Oh, look, I Diana. Oh, I haven't thought about her in years." Like, he thinks about her every day.
Yes.
The other thing that I loved, which because I want to get into some fan questions soon, is I loved the byplay between Dave and the Phantom with the comments on the accent, the Bengalan accent, which whatever that sounds like.
Yes.
The background of Lucy. There's been a couple of creators that have revisited, Lucy and Uncle Jasper. And I've loved how they've all done that. And so yes, I've loved how you revisited them and that play with Dave Palmer. Really did enjoy that. That was probably one of my highlights, along with the Sunda Trough. Was probably my highlight because
Thank you so much.
I really loved, because it was like you were in a sense, and sorry Dan, you could see that you were put into Dave's thoughts, into his mind, as he's figuring out who the Phantom is. So yeah, I really did like that.
Oh, thanks.
And I'm with you, Jen. We need to get to the fans' comments. I'm conscious of that, but I've got two last questions before we get to that, Matt. First one is, do you have a favourite part, or no? Was there one particular light bulb moment that you had where you said, "Oh, I can connect that"? Was there one of those that you particularly chuffed with, or proud of, or happy with the way it's come through?
Yeah, I think Jermayn just mentioned it with the accent of the Phantom.
Yeah.
I've had that in the back of my mind for years. That what is the Phantom's accent? He lives in Bengala. He was educated in America. He spent his early childhood there. What sort of accent would he have, and is he masking it? Wouldn't it be an interesting little scene to imply that Dave is onto him right from the start? No. And we know that, in the Phantom Lord, Dave becomes his family, and Dave is well aware of who he is. But what if Dave knew right from the beginning, even before Diana and he got together, and he just thought, look, I'm going to respect this guy. This is obviously Kit Walker. I'm not stupid, but I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah, I really like that. No, that's cool. And my other question is, your thoughts on your, for those who came in late page, the Cy Barry homage, your thoughts on that as a poster, and where can I buy it? And can I tell my wife it costs less than $20?
I'll tell you the origin of that. I have a friend, Brendan Halliday. He's in the Melbourne comic scene. He does self-published stuff, and he's a comic head. Like he's mainly a Marvel, DC, Image, that kind of stuff, but he knows his comics. And I was absolutely shocked one day when he approached me and said, "Matt, can you tell me what's the story with the Phantom?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, I've bought Phantom comics over the years, and I never have understood what's going on in them." And I thought, well, what do you mean? And he said,
Such a foreign concept.
yeah, I was baffled. I thought, it's so simple. What do you mean? What don't you get? And he says, "Oh, I buy an issue, and there's this stuff is happening in this country, and I buy another issue, and this stuff is happening in another time, and like what is the Phantom story?" And I thought, what's missing from the Phantom comics now is something we took for granted in the 80s.
Agreed.
Every comic you bought, there'd be this little recap.
Yes.
And so I started looking through more recent issues, and that's just disappeared. Now imagine, you're an 8-year-old or you're a 9-year-old, and you get your pocket money, you go down to the shop and you buy a Phantom comic. You might not, like Brendan, you might not have any idea what's going on. And you might have to buy 10 issues before you actually figure out what is happening.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm going to counter that. I'm going to go through all of my Lee Falk stories, and I'm going to find the quintessential version of it. And I couldn't find one. I found that this version had a good bit, and this version had a good bit, and this version had a good bit. So I just shopped them around, and I got, in my mind, what was the best version from a lot of different sources. And I also looked at the best imagery. that that Cy Barry had done, and I chucked it all together in one page. And I realized immediately that people would come after me and say, "Oh, you know, you've just copied it." So I acknowledged that this isn't me, guys. This is my main man. This is Cy Barry. Now, wouldn't it be great if Frew published that page in every Frew comic?
Yep.
Yep.
Well, at least every. You're right. We took it for granted. I loved the for those who came in late at the start of each, and I would reread it. I'm like you, and when you say quintessential panels, I reckon you've chosen some rippers. And it was just something that was part of. You pick up the Phantom comic, you read that, and go, yeah, I know where I am.
There we are. Yeah, that's right. So a first-time reader.
Yeah.
Like I said, quintessential. There's nothing in there that doesn't have to be there. It's just the basics, but it's well written. And I'm not taking credit. It's Lee Falk wrote this really well. And imagine, you know, every Frew comic, you open it up, there's Dudley's message, there's that page, then there's the story.
Yep. I would have no problem with that.
Now, Frew, if you're listening, I'm not trying to get royalties or anything. Just do it.
Yeah, or the other way you could do it, and just thinking outside the box, is there's a lot of artists who want to have a go at drawing the Phantom. So, you know, like you've got Glenn Lumsden in the title box, you know, you could have, okay, you want to show us that, you know, so when an artist submits their art that they want to have a go at drawing the Phantom, they can, maybe that's what they draw, is they redraw their Legend of the Phantom. And then, you know, you've got 50 different versions, 50 different alternative ways of it being drawn, which you can scatter throughout the stories or something.
Yeah.
Serious question though, Matt. Can I get that as a poster? Is Frew going to have it, or will you produce it for a Supernova or something?
Well, I have printed it up. I did have it at the last Supernova.
Oh, okay. I should have turned up to that then.
Yeah, you should have.
I might have to talk to Frew about it. You know, I don't want to get in a situation where I'm selling something that I've been paid for. You know, because I know some creators have had issues with selling their cover art, and then Frew saying, "Well, you know, like that was commissioned by us."
Yeah.
Like fan art's one thing, but there might be some technicality there that I wouldn't sell it anymore, just to keep everyone happy.
Fair enough.
That's a very good answer on a public space like a podcast.
Yeah.
The last question that I've sort of gone past, and it wouldn't mind coming back to. You said that the Childhood of the Phantom version that you liked better was the 1944 one. That was the first of the two. It was the 11th Phantom story ever written, which means that the ones that you've referenced here, you're clearly a fan of the early Falk stuff. What is the appeal of the early Lee Falk for you?
He was just on a magnificent run, I reckon, from his first story up to the mid to late 40s. As the case with all comics, things start to get a bit stagnant when time locks in. You know, when Diana and the Phantom had that urgency in their relationship in the start, and then it just became the status quo. And so I think when the second story came along, there were elements of it that were different from the first one, and I just had to pick, you know, which one am I going to use? And the elements that better suited my story were in the first one. So I looked at the second one to see if I could mine anything in there, and I decided just to kind of leave that one aside. And as I said before, that it's virtually the same story, but Jasper and Lucy are different. You know, there's different things in there. The first story implied that Kit didn't even have a name when he went there, and they named him Kit because they had to call him something, and they were walkers, and they gave him his name, Kit Walker. Up until then, he was just like, you know, Jungle Boy. You know, he was just the son of the Phantom, didn't even have a name. So I don't necessarily like that detail, and I didn't make a call either way in the story. But I did.
You had the post box had Walker on
Walker, yeah.
yeah. So it was
So,
clear Walker family. I picked that up.
yeah. Because that's, yeah, the Ghost Who Walks. Is there a possibility, you guys know your Phantom lore and your publication history? The Childhood of the Phantom wasn't written by Falk, was it?
The theory is that the first one was written by Alfred Bester, and then as the theory continues, Lee Falk wanted to improve it, so he rewrote the story with the second one.
That's fascinating as well. That, someone else came in and wrote this landmark story and gave, like, if that's true, he's the first person that's called the Phantom Walker.
Yeah, I think the first mention of the name Walker was also by Alfred Bester, as the legend goes, that it was in the Brent Beak Broder storyline, and he uses the word Walker there. So as the theory goes, that's how yeah.
So then, you could wonder, was his surname Standish? Because originally Falk had him as Christopher Standish.
Yeah.
And so, Falk has now run with it and sort of taken it back through the different generations that he was always Walker and Walker's Table and all this kind of stuff. But yeah,
can I tell you my theory on that?
Yeah.
I like the fact that he was Christopher Standish while he was just an ordinary, just a person. When he became the Ghost of Walks, he stopped standing and started walking. He went from Standish to Walker, and that's how I make that fit in my head.
Right. Yeah. So if he gets to old age, he's in a wheelchair, he'll be Kit Wheeler.
Roller or Wheeler, yeah.
So we put a bit of a call out. So this first one is by Adam Williams. Cover is one of those ones that works way better when opened out. Story is brilliant, so much going on, but also stuff left unsaid, unshown, which keeps things rocking along. As a newer fan, I'm sure I missed plenty of references. However, even I can tell how clever the writer was being with continuity. Great ending. Interior art style is interesting. Feels more like, say, a modern Image comic, especially the Suburbians sequence. Grew on me though. If you're going to update a classic tale, why not be bold with the visuals as well? So not a question, so to speak, just some praise for that one.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate those comments.
This one's from Callum. When is he going back to social media for OG artwork deals and general stalking? We made mention that he is on Instagram, and he says yes, but for the old fogies, Facebook is where it's at.
Yeah.
Opportunity to spruik your Instagram handle too, Matt.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that prompt. Yeah, Matt Kyme Comics on Instagram, and there is a way of messaging me through Instagram. I haven't been on Facebook for quite a few years now, and I used to be in contact with Callum and a lot of the fans on Facebook. It's just a decision I made a few years ago to leave that.
One is from Daniel, asking if the scene where they are at the charity dinner gathering was inspired by the 1996 film. This is a great pickup. It looks like the Playboy Mansion.
No, it's not. I'll have to go back and watch the film. I can't remember the scene too well. I've seen the film many times, but it's more of a nod to the Lee Falk Memorial Bengala Explorers Club.
Oh, nice.
But a corrupt version of that.
Well, I think we all know who the gangsters in the corner are, muttering away.
So another question where you just made mention, this was you made mention of Dave Palmer. Now, do you see Lily and Dave Palmer as brother and sister, or is Dave Palmer blood brother with Diana's dad?
Yeah, so in the story, I referred to Dave as the brother of Diana's father. When he goes and has a go at Fats, basically says, you're taking money away from my brother's charity. How dare you come here and do that? So yeah, Lily is his sister-in-law.
That's how I see it as well. I'm glad to see someone else. All right, another one from Daniel. Ask him about his decision to use the text boxes within each panel to give the reader an insight into the thoughts of both Dave Palmer and the Phantom, as opposed to using them to move the story along.
Yeah, that's a
Oh.
a good point. I think the idea of telling a story through the pictures really is important. Like you don't want to read a comic which is just completely covered in text. But at the same time, I wanted to do something a bit unusual with the Phantom and focus on a character that's has never really had a lot of light shone on him, and that's Dave. So having even thought captions in Phantom comics is pretty rare. You know, I don't see it very often. So, you know, I wanted to unpack like the recurring theme with the flinching, you know, that the Phantom tries not to flinch. And later on, Dave notices that he flinches, and even Dave flinches at something. I just wanted to, you know, you can't capture that without having the monologue there. You know, there's some things you have to spell out to the audience.
I liked it.
Can I, in this vein, Matt, the Graham Jackson's done the lettering to this. Was he, and I really like, I assume he's in charge of font selection and that sort of thing then too, because the different fonts really speak to the different, you know, and even the shape of the dialogue boxes or the narrative boxes, the fact that the way that this belongs to Kit and this belongs to Dave and this is a narrator's box and these are there's such a so much thought put behind that too, I thought.
Oh yeah, he's incredible.
So he's done the those boxes as well, the shape
I trust him completely with all those decisions. And he'll send me the image and say, what do you think of this? And you know, like it's always, yes, that's exactly what I want. Like I think there's a synergy. You know, we've worked together since the first issue of The Demon, you know, all those issues, and then all the Wrath of the Cursed, and then all the Phantom stuff I've done. It's been him behind the wheel with the lettering. And yeah, I can't praise him highly enough. He should be getting more work in comics, I think.
All right, next question. So this is from Gary Gaza. Are there any plans for bringing the Marshall sisters back into the limelight, or will the Thuggies have a nefarious plot the Phantom needs to thwart?
Oh, look, it's food for thought. Love the Marshall sisters. I think I don't think I would bring the Marshall sisters back because I think they were done so perfectly back in the day. And I think others have used the Marshall sisters as well. I love them. I think as well the Marshall sisters worked best before the Phantom was married because there's that fantastic rivalry that Diana has, and you see Diana have a bit of a scrap with them.
Okay, this one is from Jenny Mooney. I really love the story so much that I read it again immediately. Best story published by Frew in some time. Then I had to dig out issue 1500, read that, and then read the new story again. I hope this will continue. Love a story that gets you excited. Thank you for your comment.
That's really, really beautiful. Thank you, Jenny. I can't even express how much that means to me, Jenny. I read that comment on the Facebook and it just brought such a big smile to me. The fact that you read it twice, then went back and read the original story, and then read my story a third time, that to me is just like an ideal scenario. I would love to hear that more people have done that, that you'd be so invested in the story that you go and read the second part. You know, it's thrilling. It's thrilling. So thank you very much.
Okay, Roscoe. Now, we asked for a question, and Roscoe sent us 5. So be prepared. Roscoe, how much attention, if any, does KFS pay when approving a story that obviously delves so deeply into the lore/history? E.g., do they ever come back with feedback to say, we'll like the Sunda trough left alone? Or do they just look at the broader characterization and story?
Hmm. You know, that is a question that I've wondered myself, Roscoe. I don't know if you know, Roscoe, but I've had a difficult time over the years with getting work approved by King Features, and for various reasons. The day at the races, the script was approved immediately, and the feedback I had that it was excellent. So the issues I had with that story was the art, and then the second story, the Diana and the Heartbreakers gang, the feedback on that one was unusual, and it was nothing to do with Phantom Law. It was just whoever was approving things at that time didn't like an aspect of the story and wanted changed. Basically, they didn't want the girls to be villains. They wanted the victim to be the baddie, and that was really difficult.
So without putting words in your mouth, you're saying they're more focused on not being cancelled than the lore, history, and the actual story.
Yeah, so yeah, I wouldn't even quite go that far, but it does seem like
I can go that far
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm not getting anything published by KFS.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah,
Nope,
another
story's just been rejected.
Yeah, it does seem like the continuity and the law isn't such a big thing. And I can give you a comparison. My friend Chris Sequeira, he wrote a Star Trek story, and that had to be approved by Paramount. And apparently they just like assembled this team of Star Trek experts and super nerds who like dissected his story and gave him pages of notes on technology and timelines and continuity. Like it was like this group effort to make sure the story was absolutely airtight. And there's nothing like that with King Features, not that I've seen at least. My stories have either been approved or changes have been requested. Nothing to do with Phantom Law. It's always been like politics or I don't want to like say on the whim of the editor that hasn't really had that much to do with the Phantom Law or continuity at all.
Okay, we'll move on before you say anything or that gets you
quick.
cancelled. Okay, question 2. Were there ideas that he, i.e. you, considered but rejected for the storyline? E.g., did things flash into his head that would have been too much for fans, or were there ideas for other takes stories dealing with the law?
That's an excellent question, and I think I didn't chop anything. The things I was worried about made its way in. Like, for example, the posture of the Phantom sitting on the throne. That was something that I thought might be too much for fans, but then I thought, no, I'm gonna do it. The idea of Dave figuring out who the Phantom was based on the accent, that was something that I wasn't sure if that was going to please people, but then I just went for it. So yeah, there weren't any elements that I scrapped. There were certainly elements that I wasn't sure how they were going to be received, but I was happy with them. And I kind of thought, look, I'm a Phantom fan. I wouldn't be like hurt if I read this in someone else's story. I think this adds to the mythos. It doesn't, in my opinion, you know, others might disagree, but I don't think I put anything in there that's damaged the Phantom.
Okay, question number 3. Matt from Ross. Matt obviously enjoys delving into the lore and making things work in a continuity sense. what then are his views on the current approach to the newspaper strip where Tony DePaul is opting to, in inverted commas, delete or slash amend stories that go back more than 50 years due to discomfort with aspects of such storylines?
Yeah.
I.e., he's talking about
The chain.
the chain storyline.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the way Tony DePaul is doing things. I think there's a really good balance that he's walking there. He's taking the Phantom into new territory and into a new generation, and I think he's looking back respectfully, but he's in a position where he has to make some tough calls and he has to do some trimming, and we've got decades and decades of stories, and even as we've discussed already, I found in my research all these storylines that didn't match up and continuity errors within Falk himself. And I mean, there's many times when Falk has changed things on the fly and it's really impacted on previous stories, but it's not the end of the world. So Tony DePaul is in a difficult situation in a way that he has to try and keep everyone happy. I'm in the same situation, but I'm not writing like the syndicated newspaper strip. I'm writing a story that's being read in Australia. I don't know if my stories will ever go outside of Australia. It's not, it's not high stakes. Tony DePaul kind of is high stakes because he's the figurehead now. He's the leader. He's leading the charge. So you can't please everyone. His work pleases me, though. I think it's terrific.
All right, we're going to number 4 question from Roscoe, who's actually from WA Perth, so he's a good bloke.
That's why he's getting all of your time.
No, I said, have you got any? I must have used the word questions. I must have put a plural on it, so I do apologise. Would the idea of amending, changing details ever be the impetus for one of Matt's stories, or would it be something that he is prepared to do when revisiting an old storyline? How does he tread carefully to avoid upsetting long-time fans, and in particular, Fawkes?
Yeah, another excellent question. There's a way of doing it both ways. I've tried in my stories to be faithful to Phantom lore, but I've also put some elements into my stories that suit my take on the Phantom. So, for example, my stories are in a different time continuity than some other writers. And what I mean by that, I keep the Phantom and Diana in the 30s and 40s as an engaged couple. And my story, the issue of Heloise, that story is set in the 60s. And it's not like rammed down people's throats, but it's shown in the technology, the cars, the cameras, the way people dress. The manhunt, that's also set in the 1960s. That's not really controversial, but Kit and Heloise weren't born until the 70s. I find the Phantom tricky because you get some stories where he was a child in the 1920s, and you get some stories where he was born in the 40s, and you get some stories where he goes to Vietnam. Like, it's all over the place. So when I write a story, I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm not trying to change things for anyone. I just want my stories to be like standalone stories. I've got my own little universe happening where the Phantom married Diana in the 40s and had the kids, and they grew up and became teens in the 60s. But I don't explicitly put that in the stories.
Yeah.
The story, sorry?
Oh, you do have dates in this story?
In this story, yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is the first time I've done it.
Yes.
But I felt safe doing it because this is a prequel to the Phantom Brotherhood, so the Singh Brotherhood.
Yeah.
And we all know that that was written back in 1936. So that was sort of a safe way for me to say, in my universe,
Yeah.
the Phantom operates in the 30s with Diana, and then the 40s, and then the 50s. And then Kit would eventually, Kit or Heloise or both, would probably become active in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
Now I could pitch a story to King Features and have, Kit and Heloise adventuring in the 70s, but I don't know, that's not really something that I'm planning to do.
Yeah.
Now, I said before you can do it both ways. I think I like the idea of doing some phantom stories which are like Elseworlds or like a different continuity. Like I had this idea about doing a phantom horror comic where the phantom actually cannot die. Like he is the man who cannot die. And so he's not, obviously this wouldn't please everyone, but people would have to go into it knowing that, okay, this is a different take. This isn't our phantom. This is a horror story where everything you've ever heard about the phantom is actually true. Right? He is.
All of the old jungle sayings are 100% accurate.
They are accurate.
Yeah.
And so it is this one man. But then what effect would that have on you? What humanity would you have after 400-500 years? You've been like, so some people listening might think, gee, that sounds like the stupidest idea possible. And others might think, hey, that sounds pretty cool, like a full-on horror phantom story where the phantom actually is a monster, like he is a ghost who walks. And no, I've probably upset some people now.
You've upset all the focus.
Yeah.
That's all right.
The focus would understand. I wouldn't put that into like a normal story. That's just like an alternative way of looking at the phantom.
All right, last question from Ross. One more thought. Seem to remember Matt was concerned about having the first phantom being too helpful to natives by showing them how to utilize the poison berries for their arrows. It will be interesting to hear some more thoughts on this if there is time and if he ended up altering something in the story. It seems that hero stories often hinge on individuals being brought into new situations and bringing fresh insight or abilities that end up helping the locals, and sometimes achieving personal growth as a result of doing so as part of the hero's journey. It is a very effective story trope found in many classic stories, but the emergence of the white savior ideological perspective has kind of tainted this with respect to tales where the hero is white and the locals are not. Is Matt someone who worries about such perceptions? Does KFS? And how much can you change things before you weaken/undercut a character like the Phantom?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So
probably a podcast in its own just there. So
that's what I was going to say. That there's an hour in that question alone, and I think that King Features would have that question in mind, and it might hamstring some projects. If you think about a Phantom movie or a Phantom TV show or even a video game, anything which is going to have mass appeal, what aspects would they change or alter? The idea of the white messiah, this person that goes to the aid of the jungle people. It was a product of its time. I think the stories can be viewed through many different interpretive lenses, I guess you could say. I've read an article that really trashed the whole thing and said it's a racist concept, and I've read other articles that have said it isn't, and I've heard perspectives from different cultures, and it is it's a landmine. Am I worried about am I someone who worries about such perceptions? I would say that if you look at my comics, you might have noticed that I don't generally set them in the jungle, and I don't have the Phantom dealing much with the natives. In the latest story, Garan makes his first appearance in one of my stories. Unless I'm mistaken, I don't think he appeared at all in the issue of Eloise. So that's not me shying away from it, though. As a kid, when I was reading the Phantom, I really loved those first few stories where the Phantom was a real globetrotter. So I've set my stories in the environments I want to set it in. My jungle story is the manhunt. And yeah, that story didn't involve the Phantom intervening or trying to save the natives in any way. That was a story about him and Kit and the Jungle Patrol. So I don't know. I don't think I'm like actively trying to avoid scenes with, the Phantom being a white savior. It just hasn't crossed into my storytelling yet.
No worries. Alrighty, so this one is from Sean Bassett. So ask him if he had the choice to change anything about the last 80 plus years, other than the 21st Phantom passing on the mantle, what would it be?
I've spoken about this a few times. The missed opportunity of aging the Phantom in real time. That's something that I would love to have seen how that would have worked if we had this comic go for 80 plus years, and by now we might be up to the 26th Phantom, and so all those generations of Phantom readers would have seen their Phantom grow and have children and relationships. But as we've said before, we wouldn't have Hero and we wouldn't have Devil anymore. They'd be long gone. But stories about that Phantom could still be written. Would I change anything? I don't know. Like I love the Phantom. I love the rings. I love the oath. I love the jungle setting. I love when he's out of the jungle as well. I don't know. I can't think of anything I'd want to change off the top of my head.
Oh, you're keeping friends with the all the focus. So this one is from Tab7860 from YouTube. So far, this is my cover of the year. Really grabbed my attention. Unfortunately, I have not had the chance to read the Singh Brotherhood as yet, so no doubt some of the interesting points of this issue went over my head. However, I loved how all the characters were depicted and the vibe of the Phantom himself. Great work from Matt Kyme. Prompted me to look back on some of the older Chronicle Chamber videos where he reviewed some of his favourite early Lee Falk stories. We'll have to think. So a bit of praise there.
Yeah, thank you. That's terrific. And what a champ. He's gone back to watch some of those old videos. What a legend.
I believe this is actually him here who's actually written in.
Cool.
So here's a couple of his questions. So let me get back to it. What was the motive inspiration to put this story together? We've kind of touched upon a bit of that already. Next one, Dudley Hogarth in the opening comments referred to your story as an expansion and remaster. Don't recall the exact words. Are there any other Phantom stories you feel you would like to give similar treatment to?
Gee, I don't know. I just think I'm particularly drawn to this first story because it is the classic. It is. I think all the other stories work just perfectly as they are, but there was like we started. There's some loose ends.
Yep.
That could be tied up on this one, but it's possible. I might turn my attention to another story and try and find some loose ends.
Well, if I could if I can just quote from the message from the publisher, I haven't found the words that were referred to there by the question. Dudley says at the beginning, it's a uniquely original recreation story, which is an oxymoron. He knows, but the last line in his message there, I hope Matt might be considering where to next, because I, for one, would love to go on that journey with him. It's exciting. So that's pretty fair praise from the publisher of the Phan, mate.
Yeah, I was pretty happy when I read that.
All right, so a couple of quick answers for this one. Do you think the Phantom would benefit from remastering some of the classic Lee Falk stories?
Well, yeah, that's been done, like Fellmang,
Yeah.
he did a bunch of those. He modernized some of the old stories and did it
What did
really
you
well.
think of those? Do you like those?
Yeah, I like them. I mean, I like the original more, but that's probably normal. But why not do that? It was done was done well. I mean, he's a
So
absolutely.
do you like it more because it's the real McCoy? Use the word Moore, Ray Moore, Wilson
Yeah.
McCoy. You like that one? Too late for the dad jokes?
Yeah, and that's not lost on us.
Okay, just as the creators for DC Marvel do an ongoing monthly series, if the opportunity presented itself, would you do it?
Oh,
And would you have enough ideas to support such a run?
oh yes. Oh, hell yes.
Monthly? You just said that, like, this one we said just took nearly 2 years.
Yeah.
Monthly is really often. You'd have to quit teaching.
Oh, hell yes. Oh, look, what a dream job that would be, though, to have a monthly Phantom comic. And I think, like, I'll just be honest, like, this is the sort of thing I do, like, fantasize about, and it would be incredible. But I'd write and not illustrate.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd throw out the illustrating side and just write scripts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have anything in the works or future that you're working on for Frew at this moment, or?
No, absolutely nothing.
Do you add anything extra to your writing when you illustrate? Like you said before, that you had the script done really, really early, and then it was just good to go. Do you find that when you draw it, you go, "Oh, actually, I might just change this," or maybe the next panel I'd like to do it this way, which changes the script or anything like that?
Yeah, like I discussed before with the way the Phantom was sitting on the throne. Like originally, he was sitting in a far more traditional style, and I just thought, no, this isn't working for me.
So that was an idea that you changed as an artist, but
Yeah.
as a writer, you hadn't thought of that.
No, like in the script, it just said, the Phantom is sitting on the throne, looking sad. I don't.
Yeah.
When I write the script, knowing that I'm writing it for myself is one thing, but I need to get the script approved by King Features, so I have to, like, explicitly say what's in the script. I don't have the liberty just to write it only for my own eyes, like I'm writing it to be approved.
Sure.
But the script would have said something like, the Phantom sits on the skull cave and is contemplating or looks sad.
Yeah.
After my first pass of drawing it, I thought, no, that's not really what I wanted to achieve. I want the Phantom to look really upset, like a little child. And it was actually looking at the previous drawing of him as a child. I thought, oh, that's what I've got to go for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like you say, oh, if I could do it full time, I'd just do the writing. But there's an element there of the creative element that you've been able to add as an artist that you added.
But then in the past, I've been blessed. I've had, like, Shane Foley. He illustrated 2 of my comics, and I'm seeing my story through his eyes. And I trust him as well. Like, I trust Graham. And I trust Shane. And Shane is a massive Phantom fan.
Yeah.
And, he works these emotions into his characters. And I think, oh, yes, that's what I wanted. Or sometimes that's not really what I thought I wanted, but now that's what I want.
Yeah, sure.
And just for the records, I put Steggy in that script. Just in case there was any confusion about that, we've got Halloween is sitting by this, she's leaning up against this giant rock, and then it pans out and it pans out and it's Steggy. So yeah, Shane went with me on that one, but yeah, he
awesome.
followed my prompt.
All right. So then Tyron actually comes up with a suggestion that his suggestion is Jason Paulos to do the art for your monthly comic.
How can we make it happen? You just got to demand it. Can you imagine that? Oh, that would be so good. Imagine if Frew got in a position where they could have a second comic, or maybe have like a monthly or even just a quarterly comic that was, Legends of the Phantom or The Ghost Who Walks or something like that. And it's all Australian. And you could have, the team that they currently have working towards that. That would be beautiful.
I think Jason would do an amazing job of your phantom horror, idea that you had there before. He'd be remarkable at that.
Wouldn't he though? Yeah.
So a huge thanks to Adam, Callum, Daniel, Gary, Jenny, Ross, Sean, and Tyron for your questions. If you're listening or watching us, and next time we have a guest and we give a call out, make sure you send us your questions, and you can have the creator answer your questions. So thank you for that. Before we do go off, tell us about what comic conventions and events you're going to for the rest of 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be heading up to Sydney for Sydney Supernova in June. I will have a table there. They've very kindly made me a guest, which is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much to Supernova, Royd, and everyone involved. So I'll be there. I will have my comics out on display. I'm going to throw together some sketch covers. I might do some more lino prints, some new original ones that haven't been seen before. I will be doing a panel. Well, I'm not sure. I'm hoping to be able to do a panel. It sounds like they're considering doing a phantom-based panel. If that goes ahead, you could expect to see me and Ash Nichols from Art of Play Games talking about the game that is coming out in December. You can also expect to see some of the other Phantom creators who'll be there. And as I said, that hasn't been confirmed, but you'll look at the guest list and you'll know who's associated with the Phantom. And if it gets up, I'll be sharing a stage with them. We'll show some clips from the game and we'll talk about comics. And those panels are always so much fun because you're sitting there with Phantom fans in front of you. And it's just, it's there's a lot of interaction from the crowd. I'll also be going to Melbourne Oz Comic Con, which is my local, I'm from Melbourne. And there is the possibility of me being a guest at Metro City Con, which is also in Melbourne. And there's also coming up in September, the Melbourne Toy and Comic Fair. And yeah, they're keen to get me there. So I'll be there flying the purple banner of the Phantom.
All right, well, we enjoy you joining us tonight, Matt. Dan, always a pleasure. Now, thank you, listeners, for listening or watching us. Now, we have not dealt with Matt's history as a Phantom fan. Now, if you are wanting to listen to him talk about himself, even more than what he has about himself as a fan, go to episode 218, and in our show notes, we will have the link for that. Now, our website is chroniclechamber.com. Our email address is chroniclechamber@gmail.com. We would love to hear your thoughts, feedback, opinions, or questions that we might have missed. You can give us those on our social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, or X. and Instagram, and also on YouTube. You can subscribe to us via YouTube or through your favourite podcast apps. As always, thank you. Please get in touch with us. And for myself, happy phantoming.
Happy phantoming, everyone.
Thank you.